All right, we are live. All right. Chris, would you mind just giving the audience a bit of background of who you are, what you do?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jason. So I am a New Zealander and living back in New Zealand, although having spent a reasonable chunk of my life overseas. At the age of 12, we moved to Australia for 6 years, and I spent 16 years in the UK, in England, and plus a year in Vancouver, Canada, plus a lot of time just traveling as well. And I am the married to my wife Audrey, and got two boys, Raphael and Gabriel. They are 12 and 14, and the family's rounded out with our Labradoodle dog Zola, who might appear on the screen at some point as well. Who knows? Um, and I have been running Hands Up Holidays for, well, we've been live to the public for nearly 20 years now. We launched in 2006, and I got the idea for it back in 2002 on a trip I took to South Africa, where in addition to going on safari and exploring the wonders of Cape Town and the garden route and places like that, I also helped to build a house for a family in one of the townships, the slum area just outside of Cape Town. And this just enriched the whole travel experience so much for me in two main ways. One, in contrast to all the travel I'd done leading up to that, in that experience, I actually got to interact with the local people and gain insights into their lives and hear their stories. And then secondly, it just felt great to actually make a difference to the family, provide them with a decent place to live. And so I thought, well, I've learned some good business skills. Why don't I put them into something I find a bit more meaningful and fulfilling, and make it easy for others to have experiences like I just had? And so my next move really was to uh, essentially take a year out. And that year that I had in Vancouver was actually at a theological school called Regent College there. And that's where this idea really took root for me. And I took a class called The Soul of the Entrepreneur, where actually I wrote the first business plan for what became Hands Up Holidays, and then also another quite pivotal. That's the dog. Sorry, pivotal class that I took.
Labradoodle.
Yeah, chewing on a bone. Was called Caring for Creation, and so that helped sort of shape a lot of what we did around understanding our relationship with creation, with God's creation, framing our trips so that they are uh, stewarding and being sustainable as well. So yeah, I did that year there, and then I spent the next couple of years traveling the world, building relationships with different travel partners before launching in 2006, and it's been a wild ride since then.
Mm, mm. So did you feel called to create this business, would you say?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yes, and that was, really affirmed by some prophetic words that were spoken over me, particularly at that time when I was in Vancouver as well, by some elders in the church that I was attending. And that was great affirmation of the sense that I had of calling. Yes.
Mm. So did you have like walk us through that? Did you have like this idea and then those prophetic words were spoken to and now it was confirmed for you, or what did that look like?
Yeah. Well, I did, but it wasn't like anyone else really knew about that idea, and certainly not the the person, the elder who had the prophetic word. It was, I can't remember his exact words now. It was something along the lines of, he said, I have a word for someone from New Zealand, and there weren't too many of them in the church. And then when I think I was the only person who put up their hand. And so then he said, and this is where I'm a little bit hazy, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along the lines of, um, I believe that God is telling me that you are going to impact the world a uh, through a enterprise that you're sort of cogitating about starting up. And so that really sort of nailed it for me.
Well, so were you, like, kind of on the fence before, and then when that happened, you're like, "This is it."
I was, yeah. I mean, I was probably, somewhat over the fence, but there were some other options that I was evaluating at the time. Yeah. That didn't fit that description. They were more, just roles that I was going to be employed into. And so this was, the only thing that was fresh. And certainly it spoke to, even, going back to that time in South Africa, just I had a sense of calling even back then, the previous year, and it just spoke to me around the Beatitudes as well about blessed are the poor, and so much that can be actually that is true, and that there's a lot of that the exchange that can happen on a trip it is an exchange, and it's a two-way mutual enrichment that I think sort of hits at the truths of the Beatitudes. And certainly one thing a key thing that I take away, and so pleased that I have taken it away at a relatively early age, is around contentment, and not um, desperately chasing the next shiny glossy thing, or um, you know, envy of what the neighbor has.
Mhm,
And I think that certainly comes from the interaction I've had with people who have nothing materially, but are emotionally and spiritually rich and content. And I attribute that um, to the gospel message as well.
mm. So what's your testimony?
My my personal testimony.
Yeah, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, no, no, sure. It's well, I was raised in a Christian family, and however, my parents became Christian not too, like, they weren't raised in Christian families. So they became Christians sort of 2 or 3 years before I was born, and so they, uh, but as I say, raises in a Christian family, um, in a yeah, so raised with a knowledge of God, um, from a young age, and certainly a desire to to go deeper in that knowledge, um, and however, there's sort of head knowledge, and then there's heart knowledge. And for me, there's been pretty much all my life a head knowledge, but my heart knowledge, which really I think completes the journey, or no, 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 it's never completed, but um, rounds out that circle. Happened for me in my teenage years, really, and actually, having a personal encounter with Jesus,
Mhm,
and that's stuck with me, and I am, thrilled to be able to, walk with him every day, and and now have the opportunity to raise my own children
mhm,
in that path.
hmm. Oh, thank you for sharing.
Always a
Did
pleasure.
you Sorry, go ahead.
No, always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah. Did you feel like that was when you got saved?
Yeah, yeah, yes. But like I'm of the view that that's why I say it didn't complete the journey because it's an ongoing thing in terms of for me, being filled with the Spirit is something that we can continually seek and seek to to be filled afresh every day.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go back to hands up too. So once these prophetic words were spoken to you, what was the next step? Like how did yeah, what was the next step for you after that?
Mm. Yeah, well, I completed my studies there in 2003, and then my immediate thinking was there was a someone I was studying with who was South African, and so I shared the idea with him, and he loved it as well, and so we were actually um, going about to go into this together, and really launching with just South Africa as our one destination, and then I got some advice from a family friend who had been working in the travel industry for a long time, and he recommended that in order to appear to a broad audience as credible, we should have a greater selection of destinations on offer. And so I ended up taking that advice and spending the next 2 years traveling the world and building relationships with different communities, and that was an incredible experience. So we ended up when we launched in 2006, we had I think 22 destinations from mostly in Asia, Africa, Latin America, but we had Fiji, and we actually also had Ukraine as well, which is obviously quite timely, um, given current events. Um, yeah, yeah, that was a wonderful 2 years, and then I had the UK in mind and young professionals in mind as our target geographic market, and then demographic market being
Mm.
young professionals. And so I moved back to the UK, back to London in 2006, and launched up there. And however, really from the right from launch, we were getting bookings mostly out of the US, and then a good number from families.
Mm.
And families weren't on my radar at all when I was setting it up. It just didn't occur to me that families would want to be traveling with us. So I'd ask them, why are you booking with us? And they'd say things like, well, our children come from pretty privileged backgrounds, and we're really keen for them to have this experience so they can appreciate how fortunate they are. Or they'd say, we're looking for a great family bonding experience, and this hits the spot for us. And that really did resonate with me, and even more so now that I do have children of my own. And so within a fairly short order, we started to uh, focus primarily, I mean, not exclusively, but certainly primarily in terms of our messaging towards families. And so that has continued through to today. Um, with, I would say, yeah, well, certainly that about 90% of our clients are American. And these days it's probably, yeah, about 90% are families. But as I said, not to exclude others, we certainly do get inquiries from solo travelers and from couples or groups of friends as well. And And then, and more recently, I've launched a second brand, and that's called Impact Destinations. And the idea behind that is that a traveler's philanthropic donation will enable the experts to do what they do best,
Hmm.
and also unlock a unique experience for the traveler. So, for example, coming back to South Africa on a safari day there, guests can witness a rhino relocation from a reserve that's facing a lot of poaching of rhinos, relocated to a much better protected reserve in Botswana. So this is where the guests actually get to go in the helicopter with the veterinarian while he is darting the rhino, and then land and spend some time with a sedated rhino before seeing it getting loaded into the container and flown off to Botswana. So this is really about being able to say, I saved the life of a rhino whilst on safari, and
Mhm.
leaving a legacy that way.
Hmm. Hmm. So right away, it seems like there was sorry, the train. Right, right away, it seems like there was this. Yeah, it started to from like a worldly perspective. It was succeeding right away. What would you say were there like initial challenges that came up after that?
Yeah, well, certainly a ongoing challenge is awareness. Um, and what I mean by that is awareness that it is even possible to travel in luxury, and also to make a difference and give back. So that's our ongoing challenge. Is to get the message out there that yes, it is actually possible to do that. Um, and but yes, some other challenges. I know one thing that springs to mind from our early days was around we when we again were first launching, we had um, fixed date departures for all of our trips, and that required them to be filled in order for them to go ahead, or not actually filled, but minimum numbers, which would tend to be around um, six six people, and that but I think in sort of contrast to the advice that we were given about having a lot of destinations, the downside to doing that is that you can um, essentially have too much choice, and so particularly when you're just starting out, trying to fill these, you get, say, two people booking one trip, and then two people booking another trip to completely different destinations, or a family of say four, but still that not hitting the minimum numbers that are required, meant that some trips weren't going ahead, and so we had to uh, really, well, we decided to shift fairly quickly to the model of um, tailor making each trip, so that there was no minimum numbers, and we were able then to set the trip date according to what the clients wanted to do, and so that was one challenge that we faced, which uh, we overcame that way. Um, what other challenges? Well, things like there was, you might remember that volcano that erupted in Iceland um, in our, I can't remember what year now, maybe 2010, roughly, somewhere around there. And we had clients that were affected by that, either couldn't go to their destination or couldn't leave their destination. So that was, certainly brought about a raft of challenge, logistical challenges of caring for our clients, particularly those ones that were in the destinations and couldn't get back home.
Mm.
Um, and then launching as I say, we launched in 2006, and 2008 to 2010 was essentially the global financial crisis. So turmoil around the world, yeah, that was a rocky period, but nothing compared to COVID, which was an enormous challenge for
Mm,
us. I mean, it decimated us. No one could travel for a couple of years. That massively impacted us
mm,
as a business.
mm. Was there ever a time in that period where you started to doubt that this is what you're still supposed to do?
No, no, I don't. No, I don't think so. And I think having had that sense of calling um, is certainly what you know got me through and continues to get me through.
Hmm, wow. So what is it that you look for when you're bringing people onto the team?
Say alignment of values
Mhm.
is key, and that comes into uh, having similar vision and faith is important for bringing people onto the team, and that overlaid with uh, a love for travel and a love for being the light on the hill
Mm,
is is fundamentally what I look for.
mm, that's interesting. Do you have you found that it's hard to find those people? And then 2, my second question would be, I guess, how do you measure somebody's faith? Like, do you just take their word? "Oh, okay." Or what does that look like to you?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. Um, More or less, it's a sense thing in terms of taking their word, but then also just seeing if the word, just saying it, but in the course of the conversation and interview, if there's, I'm reminded of this is a little bit strange, but there was that TV show, the West Wing, and there was an episode where the president was trying to ascertain if someone was legit, and it was something about if they could pronounce, if it basically did, I think it was like he was drawing on a story from the Old Testament where I think if you could say the word Mephibosheth, or I've probably even said it wrong there, then you were a true Israelite. Um, and so he was looking for pointers of markers to, in the course of that conversation, to identify someone's faith. And so
Mm,
it's really just sort of just trying to be alert to markers that, yes, that they might say they're a believer or whatever, but it's looking for those markers to confirm that.
mm,
And yeah, just sort of it's being sensitive to that in the course of the conversations as well.
mm, hmm. Alright, this may be a tough question, but yeah, what would you say to somebody who's like, "Why do you only hire people of the same faith as you? That's wrong." What do you say to that? I'm sure you've had that question before.
Mm, yeah. Well, partly it's been a case where in the past sometimes we haven't um, been so rigid with that, and that has led to issues further down the track. And so it's been a case of um, really, one, being true to our values, but wanting to ensure that for our uh, team harmony, and then for the also terms of having a more confidence that the dynamics are going to be strong and that the customer experience is going to be as we want it to be.
Mm,
That we've learned over the years that it's an important thing for us to hold firm to now.
yeah. Interesting. That's so fascinating, and I can see how that's like the dynamics play into that. For instance, like the world might say one thing, but to carry out what you are called to do might ask you to do something different.
Yeah, exactly, Jason.
Yeah. Alright, let's see. Uh, what led you to study theology?
Mm.
Because
Really,
this
just
was before. Because that was before you that's before you started the business, right?
before I started it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Really, I mean, I basically just wanted to go deeper um, in relationship with God, in a nutshell, and I uh, that combined with feeling like I'd been working for 6 years at that point, and seventh year, that's obviously a biblical thing, and in terms of resting the land, so I was taking it as like a sabbatical year, um, and so it made sense to in that sabbatical year to do some study, and why not align it with wanting to go deeper with God.
Hmm. Do Was that the case? Was that the outcome?
Yeah, it was. It was. No question. I did, what's the word? Get a bit surprised initially at the the workload. But and it the study itself was, you could sort of call it neutral. Where I felt I really benefited from it was in the interaction with my peers,
Mm.
and just having that opportunity to just take a year out with other believers, um and then also with, what's the word, sort of mentoring relationships, and having a spiritual director during that year as well. So in one sense it was the study which was the vehicle to enable me to actually get that interaction and an opportunity to um have great conversations with people who are on on a similar journey.
Hmm. So was it like a theology degree, or was this at seminary, or what was it?
Yeah, it was a diploma in Christian studies, and it was a graduate diploma. Um, so it was theology school, although um, there were other people doing master's programs which would lead on to um, uh, ordination, but it was cross section really. Certainly that wasn't the only pathway, clearly, because I
Mm.
wasn't on it.
Yeah. So this was for them to become priests?
Yeah, for some, yeah.
Okay. So, I'm curious too, so would you consider yourself to be Catholic or Orthodox or
No, no. I am. eh, I don't really go in for labels that much at all.
Mm.
But if anything, I mean, like, put it this way: I attend um, an Anglican, so I think that's Episcopalian uh, church here, and um, for me, well, it's a if we are putting labels, a sort of a low church, a sort of a spirit led church, Anglican church. Um, is how I'd describe it.
Yeah, cool. Um, yeah, let's see. So in terms of being all over the place, have you raised your kids in New Zealand, or did you have kids
Mm.
when you were all over?
Yeah, they were born in London, England, and then so they well, at the ages of basically 3 and 5, we moved back. Well, I say back. I moved back to New Zealand. They moved to New Zealand for the first time, and as did my wife as well. She's actually French, so it was the first time for her living here.
So what is it was it how do you balance having how do you balance a marriage and your kids and also, a calling?
Hmm. Huh. Well, I think all of those things are callings, so that they're interlinked. Um, and I think that the key word really is balance, and it's a case of having, or making the time for all of those three areas of life, and having God weave through all those aspects, all
Mm.
those uh, three things. That sounds very abstract, but even three callings. I think that's a nice way to put it.
So what does that look practically?
Well, it looks practically like ensuring that I do make the time um, for both my children and my wife. And I mean, for example, with my kids, we have something we call special time, which is a time each day carved out for one-on-one time, really doing whatever they want. So I don't get to choose it; they choose it, and and then um, also setting aside time, such as date nights and just one-on-one time with my wife as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. What do your kids usually choose to do with you one-on-one time?
To an extent, it depends on the weather. It could be one quite popular thing, but we haven't done it for a little while now because it's just coming out of winter here. It's kind of like basketball on a trampoline. We've got a hoop on our trampoline, and just play one-on-one uh, there, or kicking the football. Although more recently it's been gaming focused. So particularly on the Nintendo Wii or Xbox, FIFA are also popular things in the winter.
So how do you balance then when you carve out time for your family, your kids, and your wife? How how do you ever feel like, oh man, I'm slipping behind in what I'm doing for work per se?
Yeah, it can happen. Yeah, but and that just comes back to thinking about what are my priorities and who are my priorities, and what is most important in life, and so things can slip sometimes. Yeah.
Mm. So what does that correction look like for you?
Mm.
Or what has it looked like?
Well, depending if it's say something around client focused, then it looks like going to bed later, and getting the job done. But if it's something that's, I don't know, not mission critical, then sometimes they just go by the wayside.
It sounds like from what you're saying, it sounds like your priorities are very clear and hierarchied.
They are, yes.
What advice would you have to somebody who's yeah, what advice would you have to somebody who is trying to balance calling with building a family and yeah, having a new and a young family?
Yeah, another excellent question, Jason. I would repeat what I said, that I really believe that raising a family is a calling as well, and and so not to lose sight of that, and also to say that um, I guess I don't necessarily want to impose uh, rigid directions on people, and I think everyone's individual circumstances can be different, but um, I personally feel like um, the the responsibility and calling around raising a family is something that is intensely precious to God, and
Mm,
so whilst you may also be called into um, some type of work, that would be still secondary to that calling around family. That's my personal view.
mm, yeah, and what do you think about yeah, do you think that people can have family and kids and a marriage but feel called to put their professional calling first?
Personally, I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, uh, I don't want to be prescriptive about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really even thought about that until now.
Mm,
But because we are called to rest, and we are called to. I mean, I also think that having balance with your family and raising your children is important. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have kids, and I'm not yeah, and I'm not yet married, so I don't know. I don't yeah, I don't know per se. I don't know how I would handle that. But I also think that in our society, especially in the West, I think people have a tendency to idolize their careers,
sure,
but also even if they do feel called to do something, I think they can still. I don't know if I'd call that idolizing, but they'd still put that before their family.
sure. Yeah, I think it's a trap that's easily walked into.
Mm. Was this always did you always think this way about family and your children as a calling?
Probably not until I had them.
Huh. Was it like right away where it switched, or was it okay, now that I'm having kids and I'm working and I'm balancing, now it's like, "Oh, I need to change my priorities."
Mm. I think right away, you know, it, it's from the moment, from their being in the delivery room and actually holding our firstborn right to my chest to bond with him in that way. Um, it was very powerful for me. Like, yes, this is my priorities now.
So what do you think is going to be next for you? And not long term, but, like, just next step.
Right. Uh well, we sort of are looking to sort of incrementally increase the number of destinations that we do offer, to try and keep things fresh. Um, so I've got a a trip planned to go to Italy to see what we can get started there. Um, and then also other destinations in the pipeline are Roatan in Honduras and Puerto Rico and Zimbabwe. So yeah, it's getting out to these destinations and yeah, checking them out and seeing if they're viable, and if so, yeah, going live with them.
Hmm. As your work has progressed, have you noticed that the demographic of people that take you guys up on these trips, has that changed, or has that stayed primarily the same?
Yeah, it's really stayed pretty stable in the family market. Um, with I'd say that the one sort of key variant would be that there's been an increasing number of sort of intergenerational trips where families are traveling with grandparents as well, or sometimes grandparents traveling with their grandkids but without the middleman, so to speak, as well. So yeah, that has been increasing.
Hmm. Why do you think that is?
Hmm. Um, I think it's probably something to do with uh, eh, people living longer and able to be active longer as well, and so there's a sort of increasing what's the word? I guess age range where a a trip can still appeal to a long age range from grandchildren to grandparents. And I'd like to think as well a increasing desire on the part of I certainly I can. This is true of my own family. On the part of grandparents to connect
Mm,
more deeply with their grandchildren.
mm, that's beautiful. Yeah. How switching gears a little bit, how do you yeah, coming back to, like, your relationship with your kids, how do you instill or how yeah, how do you navigate raising your children within the faith and, like, handling those conversations?
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, a couple of things spring to mind. One, um, we have our dining room table where that's open open space to ask any questions. There's no criticism, no retribution. Open table for anything, and so that's an opportunity for faith questions, but not only faith questions, for anything. Just growing up questions to be asked. And then for me, it's been a case of, again, not wanting to be prescriptive at all, um, but mm, keep keeping the kids free to make their own faith journeys, and not
Mm,
to impose anything on them, and so, yeah, being available for them, but at the same time not saying you have to think this way or you have to believe, but let them find their
wow.
find their faith, for it to
Mm,
be, ultimately, I believe, a more uh, deeply rooted one.
mm, wow. Yeah, that would make sense because then it's like it's a choice. It's like
Exactly. Yeah.
God isn't forcing us to believe in him.
Mm, that's right. Yeah.
So then in terms of like bringing them to like do you bring them to church with you or is that a choice that they have?
It's these days a choice. Yep.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
12 and 14.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, this is all new for me. I grew up in a Jewish family and I got baptized last year and uh and have never really had those faith conversations with family. And even
Mm,
though we'd celebrate holidays, right? We'd celebrate Passover, celebrate Rosh Hashanah. We never really I didn't have a relationship with God,
mm,
and it wasn't something that was encouraged or discouraged. So, like, I just grew up and I was like, "Oh, this isn't it's just not even a thought." And so, yeah, all that to say, it's now that I'm thinking about well, now that I'm getting married soon and thinking about having kids soon, I'm thinking about, "Okay, how do I do this?"
mm.
So what, I guess you already kinda hit the nail on the head with that, but would you have any other advice for somebody who's in my position or a similar position?
Yeah, well, I think, well, yeah, if as you're asking for advice, it'll be
Yeah, now you have to be
around,
prescriptive.
yeah, yeah, it'll be around something like, if you, as true as you can be to your own calling, in terms of being a father, um, and enabling exploration of faith. For me, it's also, I guess, modeling, uh, modeling Jesus as much as you can. Obviously, no one's going to do that even remotely perfectly. M- Doing that, then giving them over to God. Um, I'm reminded, for me, an incredibly, always emotional story is that of the prodigal son, and Um, I was talking with a friend um, at church quite recently, whose daughter currently isn't obviously in relationship with God, um, and she was saying that they give it over to God, and um, just believing that one day, so to speak, that the prodigal, so to speak, will return.
Mm,
Um, And for me, it's, yeah, that it's such a beautiful story on many levels. Um, but one aspect of it is, and that is sometimes missed, is where it speaks about um, that it's also the story of the running father, um, and so when he saw his son afar off, he ran to
Yeah,
to his son, and that was uh, going against all the norms of an elder, of a Jewish elder who wouldn't be so undignified as to run, but he didn't mind. He just saw his son in the distance, and it was complete forgiveness and acceptance. And so obviously that's modeling. God is the model. God the Father is the model there.
yeah.
But to an extent we can model it ourselves, and and you get that impression that he was there every day waiting. And it's a really powerful one for me.
Hmm. Then how do you handle discipline?
Hmm. Gosh, with boundaries, being clear on boundaries and on what the consequences are if the boundaries are breached, and really doing that as much as possible in collaboration with the kids, so that there is acceptance for what the consequences should be. Once you get that buy-in, it makes um, well, I think it makes the breach less, but also the acceptance of the consequences greater.
Mm, because they have because they've had a say in it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So so what does that look like then, or what does that look like?
Um. Well, it can look like uh, if, for instance, there's um too much, or someone uh, using a screen in their bedroom, agreeing what that consequence should be.
Mm,
So asking, we've set out the framework as to why that's not a good thing. So get that buy-in, and then just ask them. You said, what do you think should be the consequence if you do this? And more often than not, like, really surprise you with actually quite a reasonable consequence. And so it could be, yeah, I should, lose access for a day. Let's say that's what's said. And so, um, if me and my wife agree that that is a suitable consequence, then the boundary is clear, the consequences are clear, and then it's a smoother road to enforcing it.
mm, yeah. So then in terms of if there's something that hasn't been discussed, do you find that those are typically harder ones to enforce then?
Yeah, good question. Um, Well, yes, it would be harder, but then also we know we do have we've gone through what our family values are, and so that's up on the fridge, and so we look to that as our guide as well, and so if something that hasn't been formally discussed, we say is it in line with our values, and and then if it's not, then yeah, it's probably a bit harder to enforce, but there's still the buy-in of what the values are, and then understanding that uh, doing something that's not in line with those values should have a consequence.
Yeah. Wow, it seems like you're a great dad.
Oh, again, on a journey.
What does it look like to I've seen like a lot of people who are yeah, like a lot of pastors mention it's like your wife and then your kids. How do you balance that? What does that look like for you?
Mm. Yeah, I think that should be the case as well. Um, and yeah, in terms of balancing it involves um, daily check-ins with my wife, and then carving out those, as I mentioned, the date nights as well. to make that connection a priority.
Mm, that's good. That's good. Wow. All right. Well, that's all my questions. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on about Hands Up? Maybe where they can find it. I know you had a few other um it seemed like a few other organizations that were adjacent to Hands Up too for maybe students, was that I
Yeah,
saw?
you're right. Yeah, yeah. So there is Hands Up Holidays, which is our particularly family facing website. But then there's Hands Up School Trips, which is for student groups. And then there's also that one I mentioned, impactdestinations.com.
Got it. Cool. And that's just handsUpHolidays.com. And
It is, and handsupschooltrips.com. Yeah.
do you have any other questions for me or anything?
Um, I'm intrigued. How did you, what was your process of going from Judaism into becoming baptized?
Yeah, yeah, so while I was a senior in college, my dad was diagnosed with terminal esophageal cancer, and he ended up passing away. And in that journey and coming out of that, I was really looking for just a way to live life and to find purpose and meaning in all that grief, because I wasn't really somebody who handled emotions well prior to that, and I was searching for the truth. And so I part of that was starting I got really into like self-help and was reading a bunch of different books, and then I dabbled in psychedelics and did that a few times. And then I started this master's program, which I'm actually finishing up now. It was a 3-year part-time program in consciousness studies, transpersonal psychology, and spirituality. And a part of that program was looking at different spiritual traditions through the lens of Western psychology. And in that, I was reading Buddhist texts and I was reading Hindu texts, and for some reason, like Jesus kept coming up, and I was like, why is that? Why does Jesus keep coming up? And at the very least, I was like, all right, this Jesus guy must have some good teachings at the least. If I'm being intellectually honest, right? I can't If there's a common denominator, there must be something there. And so I was open to just checking that out, and this was right at the time where my fiance and I, we started dating, and I for, like, a lot of the Christian couples that I knew, it seemed like they had very healthy relationships, and that seemed like I was seeing the fruit of that, and I wanted that for myself. So I was very open to going to church, and a another couple, this was down in Austin, invited us to church, and we went. It was a non-denominational church, and was going for a year, and but just going as a way to learn the teachings. And I was sitting there on Good Friday service. Um, this was over a year and a half ago now, and they're talking about the crucifixion, and they read the part about the Roman centurion who's there, and after Jesus is crucified, the Roman centurion says, "Truly, that is the Son of God." And there was something in me that just shifted where I saw the Roman centurion, I was like, "Wow, this guy who is not of the same faith, not of the same ethnicity, is able to see Jesus as the Son of Man. And here I am, a Jew of the same heritage, and I'm denying him as my Lord and Savior." And that's when I got saved and then got baptized, and yeah, yeah. So it's for me, when I got baptized last November, and since then it's just been thing after thing in terms of just big obstacles to overcome. I would say obstacles of the enemy. I think the enemy, but also being called to really change the way that I was living my life in a lot of uncomfortable ways, and living being like a person of the world, and in college, like being in a fraternity and going out a lot and drinking a lot and partying and all this and that. I didn't really have any sort of guardrails of, like, what was right and wrong, and all that to say there's been a lot of, like, growing pains this past year, and I think it's just the beginning, honestly, but at the same time, this is like, I found what I was looking for when I went on that initial search after my dad died of looking for meaning and purpose, and I mean, I looked, but he found me,
Yeah, right.
and here we are.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciated learning from you. One, as I think one most importantly as a father, as a husband, but also just in terms of the boldness in changing your career calling, and or not changing your career calling, but changing your career as a consequence of your call. So,
Sure.
yeah, thank you
Yeah,
for
yeah.
coming on.
It's an absolute pleasure, Jason. Thank you so much.